Hello everyone, welcome back to ParsecGames, and before we start today's tutorial, I just wanted to show you this little graphic right here, which shows us that 90.8% of the people that regularly watch my content aren't even subscribed, which is kind of nuts. That's a lot of people who aren't subscribed yet. So if you're one of those, if you're one of the people that watches my content anyways and just isn't subscribed, and you keep searching up ParsecGames up there on the search bar on YouTube, you might as well subscribe, right? I mean, it's not that hard. I really promise you, I'm making more content right now, as you can tell. I'm speeding things up. I'm really starting to bring out content right now. And if you're watching anyways, you might as well subscribe to support me. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subs, and that will be really great if we could hit that as soon as possible. Anyways, even if you're not subscribed, thank you for watching, and here's the tutorial. Hello everyone, welcome back to ParsecGames, and today in episode 7 of our Five Nights at Freddy's tutorial series, we're going to look at how to make the time actually go up to 6 o'clock, and then have the nights progress. And then have the nights progress, so obviously when you get to 6 o'clock, the night is over and you get to the next night. So we're just going to do that in today's tutorial. So let's start by looking inside our tutorial. And we haven't named this sprite, I'm just going to name it, because I don't like unnamed sprites. This is going to be called the death screen. Okay, so the first thing we got to do is actually add a sprite for the time, because right now, if you look at the game, let me just start the game now. It's going to show first night, 12 a.m. There's actually no night timer up there in the corner, so we got to add that. So we're just going to make a new sprite, call it clock. Now we're going to import the sprites we need, and these can be found in the Fnaf textures clock folder. These go obviously from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. and they're already have their corresponding time, but we're gonna move the 12 up to the first position and call it 0, just to make it easier for ourselves, because then we can just count from 0 to 1, 2, 3, and so on, instead of counting from 12 to 1. That's kind of strange, so we're just gonna call it 0. And let's move it to the top right corner. Let's try out the position, 150 maybe, 60, 75, and yeah, so 175 and 150 is pretty good. And the size can just be 100, that's a pretty good size. And now obviously when the flag is pressed, the sprite has to hide. And when it receives start game, it's gonna show itself and set the time to, and we need to actually add a new variable called time. Set the time to 0. I mean, in theory it's gonna say 12 o'clock, 12 a.m., but we're just gonna call it 0 now, because that's easier for us. Like that. And then just repeat until the time is 6. Switch to costume time. Okay, but now what we need to keep in mind is that Scratch actually, when switching to a costume, when it's a number, the number actually doesn't refer to the name of the costume, but the number. And in this case, the costume with the name 0 is the first costume. The costume with the name 1 is the second one. So what we actually need to do is add a +1 here to the time, so that now when the time is 0, it switches to costume 12 a.m. So now when the time is 0, it switches to the 12 a.m. costume. And if we now change the time, let's change it to 1. It's going to say 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. Then at 6 a.m. it's going to stop. So we need to add another one of these after the loop, because when it's 6 a.m. it stops switching costumes here and goes to the part after the repeat until loop, which is going to be this one. So it still switches to 6 a.m. even though it says only says repeat until time is 6 a.m. Now what we need to add is actually making the time go up. And in Fnaf, 1 hour lasts about 96 seconds, pretty close to 96 seconds. So what we need to add is repeat until time is 6. wait 96 seconds and change time by 1. So this way when the game starts, it's going to take 96 seconds and then it's going to turn up to 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. And then when it reaches 6 o'clock, this is going to be done. And then what we're going to do is we're going to trigger a broadcast, which is going to be night over. So this happens when it turns to 6 a.m. It's going to broadcast night over. And in that case, we need to actually make all the other scripts stop, because the game is pretty much over at this point, well, the night. So all the other mechanics aren't working anymore, so the power doesn't run out after it's already 6 a.m. And any jump scares that are happening actually stop when it's 6 a.m. Even the Freddy jump scare, the Freddy playing his music in the door, if it turns to 6 a.m. while he's doing that, you're still going to survive the night and he cancels his attack, so to speak. So what we're going to do to make sure that he doesn't attack when it's already 6 a.m. is just go to the jump scare sprite and add in if not time equals 6 a.m. or 6, then it does jump scare. Because if it is 6, he shouldn't do the jump scare, obviously. And then we also need to look at the office sprite, because that's where the Freddy animation is. You know, the animation where he's in the corner and he sings his song. And as you can see now, the time turned up to 1 a.m. and it also displays 1 a.m. now, so that's working. So now let's look for the part where he starts singing. Which is this one. So what we need to add now is add in a lot of if then else clauses, which is if the time is 6 a.m. or 6, I always say 6 a.m. it's 6, he should stop the script, and if else, he keeps going. So basically what we're going to do is add pretty much any important point. So for example, after he's waited a random amount of 6 to 10 seconds, he's gonna usually broadcast the Freddy doorway music, so that music starts playing. But if we add this in here, he's gonna check whether or not the time is already 6 o'clock, and if it is, he won't do the rest of the script. And if it's not 6 a.m. yet, he's gonna continue his script, and we're gonna add this part here into a lot of segments in here to make sure that he doesn't jump scare you when you've already finished the night. So let's just add this in here as well. And in here as well. Now in theory it can happen that he already broadcasted this part and is doing this repeat until part. And then while this is happening, the clock turns to 6 a.m., which means that he's going to be flickering while it turns to 6 a.m. So what we're going to do is add in or time equals 6 in here. So if the time turns to 6, he's going to stop blinking around as he did before. So now the jump scare is not going to happen when it turns to 6 a.m., which is already pretty good. Now what we're going to do is make sure the power stops running out when it's 6 a.m. because it's not necessary. So we go to the usage sprite, and here we have repeat until power is below 1, and this is the part where the power goes down. Now we're going to add power is below 1 or time equals 6, because in that case he should also stop. Okay. And now what we need to do is also make sure you can't put up the camera anymore when it's already 6 a.m. So we're going to go to the sprite. That's this one with the arrows. I don't know what to call it. It's like the hotbar where you open the camera. And it's basically the same as with the usage sprite. We're just going to add in or time equals 6 in here as well. What we need to keep in mind is that if it's already within this repeat until loop when the time hits 6 a.m., it's still going to finish this whole loop in here before it notices. So what we need to add is add a when I receive game, wait 0.05 seconds, and then wait until time is 6 a.m. Stop other scripts in this sprite. So then this one's going to be checking if it turns to 6 a.m. and if it does, it's going to stop all the other scripts here, including this one. So then you won't be able to open your camera anymore. So I'd say we start the game now, just as a test. So as you can see, the time is 0 and it says 12 a.m. Well, oh, we still need to fix that. The time is behind the door right now, so we need to add in into this repeat until, go to front layer. That should fix it, yep. And it's also going to be in front of the camera as well, which is good. Yep, that works pretty well. And what we're going to try out now is to manually set the time to 6 a.m. Let's do that. So now it says 6 a.m. up here. Now the usage isn't going down anymore because there's no usage at all. And you also can't open the camera anymore. And as you can see, two things are missing. First of all, the animation that comes up when it turns to 6 a.m. And also, all the sounds are still going. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into every sprite that's creating a sound right now and just make it silent as soon as the 6 a.m. hits. So we can just go into the audio engine sprite and pretty much just as with every other sprite, we can just add an or time equals 6. So now when the time equals 6, this one's already silent. But as you can tell, only some of the sounds I've stopped. The ambient sounds are gone, but the main office sound is still going, which is in the complete map sprite. So over here, we need to add in or time equals 6 once again. Right. Time equals 6. And we can add this pretty much everywhere. Okay, just stop the project from running because it got really annoying, the sound. But we're going to try it out now. We're going to start the project. So now we have a clean beginning. And now we're going to manually set the time to 6 a.m. As you can tell, all the sound stopped. We can't open our camera anymore. We can still start the lights, but that's not going to be a problem because now we're going to add in a sprite that goes on top of everything else, which is going to show us the animation. Okay, so what we got to do is make a new sprite. We're going to call it 6 a.m. animation. And now we need to find the correct costumes for it, which are in the textures 6 a.m. folder. Import all of these. And we need to actually add our own costume here. So let's just paint a new one, convert to bitmap, and use the fill bucket. Set the color to black, so brightness to 0, and just make it black screen, call it black. And now what we're going to do is we're going to script it. So first of all, the position should obviously be 0, 0 because it's supposed to be right in the middle. And then when the flag is clicked, it should hide, like pretty much every other sprite in the game. And now when it receives night over, it goes to 0, 0, and then repeats 10 times. Go to front layer. This is important because we want it to go in front of every other layer. And then set ghost effect to 100, and then show. So now it's showing, but the ghost effect is at 100, so you can't see it. And then add in change ghost effect by -10. So this is going to make it fade in slowly. 10 times minus 10 is minus 100. So it's going to go from 100 to 0. So it fades in, and then it needs to keep being at the front layer, or we remove these. So what we're going to do is just go into these power percent things and then add in when I start as a clone, wait until time equals 6. And in that case, it's going to wait one more second just for the fade in to happen. And then it's going to hide and delete the clone. I don't think we need to hide them, but anyways, we're going to do it. And what we're also going to add is, just to be extra sure, we're going to add in repeat 100 times, go to front layer. So it definitely stays in the front layer until this 1 second wait is over. So let's just set the time to 6 manually. Time. So as you can tell, that didn't work because the night over broadcast isn't broadcasted if we manually set the time to 6, because it only gets broadcast when the clock reaches 6 on its own. So what we're going to do is actually change this to where is it? Start game. And then we're going to add in wait until time equals 6, just to be sure. It's not gonna make a difference when it, it sort of naturally turns up to 6 o'clock. But if we want to do it manually right now, just for testing, we gotta add this to make sure that it actually happens. And now let's go to the power percent, because I could see that parts of it didn't go away. And now we also need to actually add to the HUD that the same thing happens as with the power percent, that it hides itself when it reaches 6 o'clock. So what we can actually do is just take this part and add it to the HUD, because that also works with clones. And then the same thing is going to happen as with the rest of the HUD with the numbers. So let's just check that. Okay. And now let's set the time to 6. As you saw, maybe the numbers went away, but the actual usage and percentage, power HUD items didn't go away. So we need to go into the HUD sprite and then add in or time equals 6, so that when it's 6 o'clock, it doesn't go to the front layer anymore and just hides itself. So that's going to get rid of one of the icons on the HUD, but we're also using clones, so we need to add this part here as well. And now what's going to happen is, actually when it turns to 6 o'clock, one of the HUD elements is going to go away immediately, and the others are going to wait 1 second and then go away, because this one just checks for 6 a.m. and then hides immediately. So what we need to add is that if it gets to this part because it's 6 a.m., which we're going to check by adding this, if time equals 6 a.m., it's going to wait another second. And if it's not, that means that the power ran out, so it's going to hide immediately. And if it is 6 a.m., that means that it got to this part because of it being 6 a.m., so it's going to wait another second. So now let's try it out. And now, just for good measure, to make sure that there's no bugs, we're going to go into the night number screen, and just before the start game is broadcast, set the time to 0, because it could happen that setting the time to 0 after the broadcast could make the animation already happen, even though the night is just starting. So we're just going to be on the safe side and set the time to 0 even earlier, maybe even 2 seconds earlier, just to be sure. So let's try it out. I'm starting the game right now. So now the time is set to 0, and it seems to be working all right. I can open the camera and everything. Now let's manually set the time to 6, and that almost worked, except the clones are still going to the front layer, so we need to add this as well to the clones. And now it should work. So let's just start it again. See, this is the thing with programming. It's a lot of testing, making sure you didn't forget anything. But it's really important. The more you test, the less bugs you're going to have. So everything works. Let's set the time to 6. See? And it worked. Okay, so now we have a black screen for us to do the animation. So what we're going to do now is add the 5 a.m. Overlay, which is this one. So switch costume to 5 a.m. and create a clone of myself, and then it switches to the black costume. Let's add that in here before the animation starts, so that the clone can also fade in, just like the other parts. And now to control which clone does what, we're going to add in if costume number equals 2. Then we know it's this 5 a.m. sprite. It's going to do the animation as well. And then it's going to switch to this costume right here, which is background. So now we're going to have what we have right now is a black layer, and then in front of that another black layer which has the 5 a.m. writing on it, as well as a hole in it, so we can actually push these numbers upwards. So what we're going to do is we're going to create, as soon as it switches to the background costume, we're going to also create a new clone as well. So we're going to switch to costume 5 and once again create a clone. And when this clone is created, costume 5 is costume number 1. If costume number equals 1, then it's gonna wait 1 second and then move up, I don't know how many times. We're going to check how many times we need to move up. Change Y by 5, for example. And we're also gonna make it do this as well. Switch to 6. And for that, we're gonna have to make sure it's at position 0, 0. And set Y to, for example, minus 120, and then back to 0. So you already saw the animation for a moment there. So that when it creates the number 6 clone, it's gonna be, the number 6 is gonna be further down than the other parts. So we need to add in if costume number equals 3. And now we need to do these parallel, so these always need to be the same. Now let's try it out. New game. Now let's set the time to 6. So that was pretty good actually, almost worked. We just need to change this right here. So the way we're going to do that is actually, we're just going to calculate it, because we set the 6 to be at minus 120 and we want it to go up to 0. So these two, when they're multiplied, need to even out the minus 120, so they need to be 120. So either we set this to 6, make the animation faster, or we set the repeat time to 24, because 24 times 5 equals 120. We need to do the same thing here. Now let's just restart the game and try it again. And then the animation should work pretty well. So let's set time to 6. As you can see, that worked perfectly. And now the only thing that's missing is the sounds, because you hear a bell and then some kids cheering. So we need to import those. Upload sounds 6 a.m. And there are these two, children and clock. Okay, so let's play the clock when the animation starts. So right when it starts fading in, it's going to play the clock. And then when it starts moving up the numbers, it's going to play the children sound. So let's just restart the game again and try that out. And again, manually set the time to 6. And now we should hear the sounds along with the animation. Perfect. Okay, so now what we got to do is that when the animation is finished, it needs to change the current time by 1. Change time, it needs to change the current night by 1. So we need to go to current night, change by 1. And we're gonna do this right when the animation starts, because if for some reason your game crashes right when you get to 6 a.m., you still want to have the progress. So we're just gonna change this by 1 just when the animation starts. And now what we need to do is that when the animation is finished, it needs to set the time back to 0. And broadcast show current night, and this should hopefully work. So let's try it out. Right now it's going to start with the first night. And now if we set the time to 6, it's going to do the animation, then change the night by 1, and then restart the game. So here's the animation. Now it's gonna... So as you can see, there's a slight bug here. We obviously need to add in a longer wait time, so let's set that to 5. Okay, so obviously that was kind of buggy. And what we're gonna do is set the time to 0 before we broadcast this. And now add, when I start as a clone, wait until time equals 0, and just make the clone hide. And delete itself. Except and we need to actually have the broadcast in front of this, because if we set the time to 0 and this clone deletes itself right there, it's not going to broadcast anymore, so we need to do the broadcast first. So now what's going to happen is after the animation, it waits 4 seconds and then broadcasts show current night and sets the time to 0. And that's going to make all the other parts of this animation disappear. And we also need to add this part to the main script here, so that also the black layer disappears. And now it should work. So let's restart the game. 12 AM, first night. And now let's set the time to 6. Okay, animation is coming up. Now it's going to wait 4 seconds. And it shows the current night. Now, as you can tell, we have a bit of a problem, because actually all the other parts of the game were still running in the background as the animation was going on. So what we're going to do now is just make them all stop with the animation when it starts. When it turns to 6 AM, the animation is going to make all other parts of the game stop, so that they're restarted completely when the game starts again, when the night starts again. What we need to do is basically make a script that stops all other parts of the sprite when the time reaches 6 AM. So what we're going to do is, when I receive game, wait until time equals 6. And in that case, it's going to stop all other scripts of the sprite. So that basically all these other parts of the game just stop working as soon as it's 6 AM. So we need to add this to the office, the fan, the doors, the buttons, the camera bar. That should be it. So now if we restart it, game is still working. That's always good. And now we set the time to 6. It's going to play the animation. And now all other sprites in the background actually stopped doing anything. You didn't notice it, but they stopped. And what we also need to do is just make this show current night actually go to the front layer when it shows itself. So let's try that again. And now that should work pretty much perfectly, I hope. Okay, so let's set the time to 6 AM. Animation plays. Okay, that was pretty good. One more thing. We should hide the office sprite when it turns to 6 AM after at least 1 second, because you could actually see that behind the show current night. Right now we're just adding in really small details just to make sure that it's absolutely perfect. Also, let's add that to the camera opener bar. Same thing here. Let's start it again. So this is kind of the tedious part of programming, when you just keep, when it's a certain part of the game that you want to test, and so you need to keep restarting the game to make sure that it's absolutely perfect. Yeah, so now the game worked. What we need to add is that the show current night should actually go to the front -1 because the static is supposed to be on top. And also I would add a little more time after the animation because you can the sound hasn't faded out yet. The kids cheering hasn't ended when the when it displays the new night. So let's just restart the game again. Okay, first night. Set the time to 6. Yep. And now it showed second night. And now if we set the time to 6 AM again, it's gonna do the animation again. Now it says third night, and so on. So that works perfectly. So now we have the 6 AM animation and going up to the next night. And that's all for the episode today. So as you could tell, this was a lot of trying out and a lot of making sure that there's no bugs. But this is really important because this could be game-breaking stuff if we mess this up. So I wanted to make sure that we don't forget any possible problems. And by constantly restarting the game, you always make sure that you're basically bug testing the way the player's going to play it, because they're going to play from the first night. So we should also bug test from the first night on. But it seems to work alright, which is good. So now we have the 6 AM animation done, and the game is actually playable because you can get through one night and then get to the next night. So see you in the next episode. This time I took about a month to do this one. I hope you're satisfied with my frequency of uploading. I've tried to increase it a bit. Anyways, thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and like and share this video as well, because we're almost at 1,000 subscribers and that's gonna be great. I'm gonna be really excited because I remember when I filmed, I think last episode, I said we're almost at 800. Now we're almost at 1,000, so it's going pretty quickly now, which is great. I'm really glad about that. I'm glad about everyone enjoying these videos, and I'm glad to be able to help people in the comments when they have questions about their projects. I try to always help them. So if you have any problems, just comment below, and if I see it, I hope I'll see it, I'll try to help you the best I can. And see you in the next episode.